Oh. Good morning, everyone. We are live this morning on the Talk Quiz. So this is the I Am Sound Talk Quiz, and we talk about awkward stuff that really matters to people. And this morning I am joined with Charles, who's usually with me. Morning, Charles. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nat. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm in London this morning, so I'm very chilled. Having a nice day already, and got my coffee and my croissant. And we've got Jules as well. How are you, Jules?
I'm great. I'm quite excited.
Yeah.
Very unusual for 10 a.m. in the morning.
10 a.m. Friday morning talking about sex. What more do you want in life? So I just want to, first of all, we'll have a little bit of an introduction with you first, because we only met last week, didn't we, Jules?
Yeah.
So, I've got to introduce you to everyone, and basically I'm going to tell them how fantastic I think you are. So we met at Medicine Festival, which happened. We all went last week, and we randomly started talking. I don't really know how we got onto the conversation. I think it's probably me taking us there, but we ended up talking about sex, and you told me about what you do, which is an incredible project. So do you want to tell us a little bit about SexClub and what that actually means? Because I've been saying it to people all week, and everyone's like, what is that? I think they think it's some kind of orgy, but I've been correcting them and telling them that it's not an orgy. But do you want to tell the viewers and potential people coming on board what SexClub actually is?
Okay. So SexClub started for me 3 years ago, and I found that I didn't have a space where I can talk about sex. One of my mutual hang-ups is that I get mute in sexual situations. So I'm in a sexual situation, I have all the words, all the vocabulary, but it just doesn't come out. I have no idea how to string together a sentence that would actually translate my inner experience or what I want outwards, let alone that I maybe even knew what I wanted. So I started to go to tantra courses and sex positive scene, explored play parties. And yeah, it was just all a little bit too much still for me, because I still had so much internalized shame around it that I just didn't feel comfortable yet in these environments. And so where can I talk about it? My friends, yes, but it's just very high level and not very detailed. It's we had sex, maybe talk a few positions, how we felt, but not really to the granular details. So, and because I was part of an intentional community where we had a sharing circle every single Tuesday, also very interesting, we shared our deepest fears with each other, but somehow topic of sex rarely came up. So I took the concept of a sharing circle and another group of women that I knew, they already had a thing called SexClub going, where they would watch feminist porn, and wow, brilliant. So I combined these things together, and it now has evolved into a series where we basically, it's a non-judgmental space where we talk about sex and practice talking about sex in a low stakes environment, because once we're in a sexual situation, the stakes are quite high. Mm-hmm. And it's more difficult to practice. So often I see SexClub as a rehearsal space for the real situation.
Is it like role play? Is that that's what I'm envisioning? It's like two people are sitting there conversing and pretending that they're talking about sex, or pretending they're with their partners, or what would it be?
They're not pretending talking about sex, they actually do.
That's not how that
works. So it's both actually. So the basic concept is we get to talk, everyone gets a certain amount of minutes, and they get to speak uninterrupted, and the rest listens. So there's a two-way thing going on. I get to speak about it, and other people also get to listen to my experience, and I get to listen to their experience. So it's really, peer-to-peer sex education. Yeah. And it's also finding just this vocabulary and the words and the expressions, how to express something. And also that we're not alone in what we're experiencing.
I think that's the big point, isn't it? About whether you're feeling alone or not. It's not because you don't really speak about this stuff. You can feel very alone, but it's so common now to find people that have some form of issue related to sex in some way, whether it's pickup lines, whether it's actual sex, whether it's aftercare, whether it's, orgasms, which is what we're going to be discussing today. So you've obviously, something I'm intrigued by, obviously, this is I've been talking to my mom and dad about what you and your business partner Connor does as well this week, and a few other people. And the responses have been really interesting, especially for my parents as well. They were both like, oh, is that what they do? Oh, my dad's like, what's that? Do I need to go to sex club? And just joking. But what do you feel that, older people, when you talk to them about it, do people get more shameful as the older generation? Because I was telling my neighbor, and he's just like, oh, okay. And it's been quite a tense subject to bring up, but then I make it more fun and quite relaxing. But do you find that as well? Do you find that a lot of people have a bit of fear the older that they get?
Yeah, great question. Usually when I mention sex club, everyone is first like, ooh. And when I then go into it and just take out this it's sex, and just make it it's a rational thing we should talk about, because we've never learned really talk about, or the majority of us just hasn't learned talking about it, or actually has been probably properly educated about it. So everyone will have a degree of feeling uncomfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
Often, I think what you say, when you just make it light and fun, and also just it's normal to talk about it. It puts the other person at ease as well. And in terms of older adults, last night I was actually sitting around the kitchen table with my friend's dad and his mate. They were playing croquet all day. And they're like, oh, what are you doing tomorrow? I'm like, oh, I'm going to go on this radio show, talk about Sex Club. And my friend's dad, he already knew about it. So he was questioning more about it. And they were both listening. And there was something definitely in me where I'm like, wow, I'm now sitting with my friend's dad around the kitchen table talking about sex. Is that, oh yeah, no, it's normal. Great, sweet. And they just really, just asked and also just genuine curiosity, basically, I would say. Yet, it's obviously different from person to person. So I wouldn't want to make a generalization in terms of age. We did have a 70-year-old man coming to Sex Club saying it's the first time ever that he's spoken about sex in his life to other people.
Oh, wow. 70.
Yeah.
Wow. I talk about sex all the time.
Yeah.
I can't imagine making it to 70. What are you about with this, Charles? Do you feel comfortable talking about sex? Has it ever bothered you?
I think it depends what situation you're in and who you're with the different energies of the people in the room, because sex on one side can be, really taboo, and depending on who you're with. I mean, it all boils down to communication ultimately, and how we've had this stuff communicated with us from a young age, and particularly in this British society, speaking as a British person who's grown up here, that it is viewed in a very awkward way. It's very sort of behind the closed doors, and then there's the other end of the extreme, the sort of the sexual rebels who go against the grain of this conformity and just are overtly sexualized and go to the BDSM parties and the sort of the Berghains and whatever. I mean, sex communicated to me. I remember the sex talks I had vividly with both my parents. My dad sat me down in Harry's bar in Ludgate Circus next to his office. I think I was probably about 14. And he said, now, one night stands are good. There've been a few, but sex is always better with someone that you love. And that was it. And we ordered a margarita. Great pizza if you're ever down at Harry's bar. And then my mother, for some reason, I was just walking down the corridor at home from the kitchen, and she was in the utility room, and she was just like, "You've always got to treat women properly," really angrily, as though I'd mistreated a woman, and that hadn't happened. I was young, I was 13, 14, and then that was it, and sort of went back into the utility room, totally unprovoked. Came from there. I don't know, maybe my dad had pissed her off or something, and I was the man who happened to be in her line of target, and that was it. And sex education at school was extremely awkward.
We allowed a video for you. We used to have a video that was played on they used to put the TV on this wheelie box, wheel it out and press play and just let us watch this really shit video.
Sort of really bad animation. And I just remember my biology teacher, bless her, Miss Bradley, who I don't think was particularly, she was very young, and I don't think she'd been particularly sexually active in her life, and she was just standing next to the TV, sweating, sort of staring out of the window, and then we wanted to put questions in a box and ask any questions we had about sex, and she sort of pulled them out and tried to like motor through them really quickly, and of course all the boys are at the back like, and you know, it was an interesting dynamic. But
do you remember one of the questions?
yeah, I remember one girl asked why do you give oral sex? Why do you give a blowjob? And that obviously sent everyone in the classroom into hysterics.
Why?
Yeah.
Did you not answer us?
No, I don't think I'd had one by that point. So,
Jules, do you have an answer for that question? Why do we give oral sex?
Pleasure.
I think that's the only answer.
That's the ideal scenario, to be honest, and I guess often maybe to please someone.
Yeah,
an obligation as well.
Yeah, I suppose the sex for me, boils down to like there's the connection with someone that I love. My dad was right at Harry's bar. It is better with someone that you know and love, and it gets better, and you grow in that scenario. But it's sort of pursuit of pleasure, not just for yourself, but the pleasure you get from pleasuring someone else.
Yeah. It's the giving. I know my mum teaches she taught a class at school called Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll. And to put my mum in that class, it would just, in my mind, it just does not fit. I can't put the two in the same. But she said that every year, she was teaching it for years at the school, and every year she'd have like a whiteboard, and she'd basically say to the kids, here's a pen, here's your paper, come up, write a word that you know is like a street word or whatever it is for penis and vagina and all these sex terms. And she said every year they basically kept making lists, and the lists would get longer and longer with all the new street words and the slang that was coming out for all the different parts of the body and all the different things to do with sex. And she'd have to go through each one and, you know, understand what they are and explain them to all the kids. And obviously my mum's, she was like, you know, army lady. So she's very kind of like stern and quite scary at school. So it's like the scariest teacher that you could possibly imagine at school is also in charge of the sex conversation. And I'm like, oh my God, Mum, you must have frightened those kids. She's like, no, I think they understood. But
she's a straight shooter, isn't she, your mother? I think that's probably lent itself to it. If you're a bit like Miss Bradley was, you're a bit like, you're sort of lambs to the slaughter. You need to have an iron fist.
Yeah, this is like the iron fist of what cunnilingus is and all this kind of stuff. So she said, I think that's probably been the highlights of her years, is having fun with the kids, because every kid just giggles, don't they? They're like, oh my God, it's so funny. But some of the words, I wish I knew what they were, but she's just like, yeah, some of these words that you're writing were just ridiculous. But okay, so we're going to move on to today's topic, which is basically the female orgasm. And the reason that we're doing most of the sex-focused content first is because baseline, I think that's when you can talk about sex quite easily and you can get into these conversations. Everybody else can talk about anything else on top of that, because that's kind of the rawest place to go, I believe, personally. So I wanted to do the first Talkwood series around sex. And we have come up with some questions, and Jules has been doing some amazing research. She sent me a good article yesterday all about female orgasms. But one of the things is I wanted to talk first about the assumptions with orgasms. And I know personally when I was growing up, it was always thinking, oh, every time you have sex, you must have an orgasm. And that wasn't actually happening. Unfortunately, I wasn't having sex and having orgasms, but the guys were. And I thought for a while that there's something wrong with me. And I didn't, at that point, understand what I could do about it. I just thought that there's a part of my body that doesn't work. That's just life. Wasn't talking to anyone around it. But guys, especially, the question that really used to grate on me a lot was like, have you come yet? Have you come yet? I'm thinking, if you're asking me that question, the answer is definitely no. I hate when guys ask that question. And then I started saying to my friends, does a guy ever ask you if you come yet? They're like, oh my God, all the time. And I'm like, isn't it off-putting? And it's like, there's no, for me, it's such a pressure. Just the simple words, have you come yet? It's like you're on a timer. And my body used to just shut down and freeze, but I didn't know what was happening at the point. I just disassociated any emotions with sex, and I was having sex that I wasn't really that connected to. And I also had a bit of a trauma scenario in the second time I'd ever had sex with someone. And he went and told everyone what happened. So everyone knew what had happened. So my relationship to sex, I just did not want to be a part of sex. I was like, oh my God, this is the most embarrassing stuff ever. Do we have to do this? But for guys, you guys, I'm saying you guys, Charles, you're speaking for men today.
Excellent. No pressure.
No pressure.
Weight of 4 billion people on my shoulders. Okay.
You're speaking for every man on the planet. So for guys, there's, like we were talking about, the locker room chat.
Yes.
So this thing. So from a guy's perspective, if you don't make a woman orgasm during sex, how does that feel? Do you feel like you've not done enough? You're manly enough? What's the guy's perspective on that if a woman isn't reaching orgasm?
I think, again, very subjective and to who you are. I think that some guys just can probably not care because they're only in it to get their end away, and that's the satisfaction they want. But there's definitely a pressure to give your partner an orgasm, because it's almost like a sort of badge of honor, like I said before we got onto the call, particularly when you're young and you're exploring yourself sexually and your sexuality, that it does become, because of the locker room chats, like, are you man enough? Can you give someone an orgasm? When you're sort of 17, 18 years old. And that can, and I suppose it can be psychological. It can be psychologically damaging if it's something, if you let it, of course, which you do at that age because you don't understand these things and how your brain works. And I think over time, if it happens with multiple partners, and then maybe it could be something that would weigh you down. But I mean, as a 33-year-old man, I've had partners that some of whom, just seem to. It would take such a long time to give them an orgasm, but it was like, yeah, great. The first few times you're like, right, we're at this for hours, let's go for it. And then honestly, it just becomes a bit exhausting. And you're like, I don't know, maybe we're not gelling to each other. There's that psychological aspect, like we be together if it's not really working, in that sense, or like, and then you're like, right, I'll go away and I've been away and done research and looked up different techniques to try and improve the methods, as it were.
Where do you go for this is really good sideline. So where do you go for your research, your techniques? Is it like American Pie, where that ancient book's been passed down through all the guys and they're all reading on how to give a woman an orgasm, or where?
No, I just stick an apple pie in the microwave and be done with it.
Say that again.
Stick an apple pie in the microwave now and just be done with it. No, it's the internet, just good resources on the internet, and anything that like, particularly for me, I like words, and when the writing resonates as well. There's some different sources out there, and you get people like that bloke who wrote that awful book, The Game, who I think has since reformed himself and has spent
incredible.
Years being like, I was such an asshole.
Yeah, he was a horrible guy, but he's reformed himself and has a book called The Truth, which every guy and woman needs to read. It's the story of his entire sexual journey and the guilt that he felt about writing The Game, and obviously being Mr. Manipulator, and then transforming it into a conscious, loving relationship that he has now. But that journey involves like adultery, polyamorous. He's going to orgies. He's taking ecstasy at orgies and being like the awkward one in the corner instead of being like the guy, the king that he thought he was going to be when he got there. It's really
ecstasy at an orgy. I don't know how that. I mean, ecstasy obviously doesn't have positive growth effects, shall we say? No wonder he was sitting in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've digressed. What was the point we were talking about?
I don't know. I'm just thinking about positive. Now I'm thinking about cocaine and positive growth effects. But anyway, that's off point. I just asked you where you were going for your research, basically.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. The tinterweb.
The tinterweb. Do you use porn as a reference of research or kind of know-how? Have you ever picked up porn and thought, yeah, I'm going to try that?
Not for research. No. For instant gratification, yes.
Yeah.
But not for research. No, I remember being given pornography for the first time. I remember being handed a copy of Escort magazine, which was pretty grim. It was sort of lorry drivers and women in tubs of baked beans. It was really very good. But I was about 11 years old, and a guy at my school, his dad had quite the collection, stole it and gave it to me. And I didn't initially become particularly enamored with it. But, there are so many different kinds of pornography, but I think using pornography as a reference point for how you should behave in the bedroom can be damaging. I think you should, explore the inner workings of your own.
For sure. So we're going to go on to some research now, because actually a lot of this stuff that we're covering now is in the research. So Jules, first of all, what is the article that you are referencing at the moment, so we can put that in the notes afterwards? Again, I forgot the title of it. I've got a link for it as well.
I think I'd love to share maybe a little bit about my own experience, which I often find a little bit more interesting than just like pure stats. And the stats really confirm my experience. So yeah, female orgasm. What you said earlier, I think there's like pressure of having an orgasm is really interesting. I also thought like, oh, I'm just going to have sex and then I will probably orgasm. And that actually then didn't happen. And it never happened with masturbation for me either. So I thought, ooh, must be something wrong with me. And it went on for a few years. And sometimes I would almost maybe come. But then, I guess I was also often asked, like, have you come? And I'm like, no. And to a point where I felt so ashamed about it, that I would at some point just say like, yes, and I would fake it for like years, because I thought there's something wrong with it. And now not with it, with me actually. Mm-hmm. So back to the research, apparently as like early as like at the 1970s, many doctors thought that it's just normal that women don't experience orgasms, which is not true. We're all body-wise, we're all capable. So often it's a mental thing rather than anything else, or actually like this lack of communication that I, for example, didn't know. Only 25 women orgasm all the time when they have sexual intercourse. So it's really rare for women to like still to orgasm during sexual intercourse. I think like about half orgasm sometimes, whereas for men it's entirely different. So I think there's like the knowledge that I didn't have. And then you could obviously say, well, I grew up when there was actually no internet. I'm 40 years old. So it was really like either we would talk about it and I would know it like that. And I didn't go to the library either. And also there wasn't any information about it. Female pleasure in like sex education is just like, yeah, it's not a thing. So, and with 33, I orgasmed for the first time. It was very unspectacular. It's just like one day I felt horny, masturbated, came. What happened? So, yeah, and then I was still I still felt so ashamed about it. In fact, I thought that's going to be a secret I'm going to take to my grave. And yeah, here am I sitting on a radio show talking about it, which still feels edgy. I mean, I talk about it in every sex club, but talking about it live on air is like, okay.
It's totally normal as well, what you're talking about, other women experience. But I think giving other women the confidence to be able to say exactly what you're going through is the aim of the game, because you're definitely the only one. I also lied about orgasms. I mean, I think I probably could have won awards for the fake orgasms that I did. And I think anybody would have known. And but yeah, it's you're certainly not alone. But your experience now is obviously now, that was when you were 33. How old are you now? Did you say, sorry?
40.
40. So you've had 7 years now. Has your experience increased like rapidly? Was it just like one day it happened and it always happened, or is it again like a distance between the two? Was it just something that took time again, or?
Yeah, in the beginning it was purely by masturbation, and every time I would doubt again, is it gonna happen again? And until I just got this confidence, I'm like, yeah, it's gonna happen. If I just give myself time, I don't put myself under pressure. And then interestingly, going with this, like, I was like, ooh, I have this new superpower now. Let's go into sex. And by the way, to say, like, before I still enjoyed sex.
Yeah.
But yeah, an orgasm is still something like I didn't want to go out of this life as I know it without having experienced one.
Yeah.
So, okay, new superpower, having sex with a guy. It was like, woo! And I'm like, no, it didn't happen, because first of all, I was under the illusion, like for all of these years, that I need to come by penetrative sex, but I need clitoral stimulation. And then, so when a guy goes down on me, usually, like it goes on for a while, then I'm like, oh, he's down there now for a while. Probably his jaw hurts. Oh, I should probably come. And by that point, the orgasm is out the window.
I've never thought of someone jaws hurt. I've never actually been that confident. Maybe their jaw hurts. I'm like, come on, keep going.
I think about how I smell. I think about if they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm thinking about them and not my pleasure anymore.
Yeah.
And that backfires basically.
Yeah.
So, and also like knowing what I actually want and need. And for example, like going from A to B, so straight shooting for the goal doesn't work for me. So when actually someone goes down on me, like I need breaks in between to almost like accumulate the pleasure, and I'm not under pressure that I need to come with this like first run.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Somebody said yesterday about when you break the pleasure, you come out of it a bit like when you take a pill and you go to the shop like halfway through a trip and you realize how high you actually are. Like,
that's right.
You go into your water and you're like, whoo.
Yeah.
Back in again, you enjoy that experience because you're aware of it.
So true. And then you panic at the checkout and buy a load of like Haribo and Coca-Cola and you went for like vegetables.
You got like every flavour chewing gum just in case. You're like, okay, cool. It's just, yeah. But I really enjoyed that word yesterday. And obviously, like you've just said, it's that stopping and starting. I never thought of doing something like that. But I think because I faked a lot of sex, I was just like, oh, and I had a lot of trauma, unfortunately. I had a lot of stuff that I went through. And so my disassociation, like when I detached myself from sex, I started making it more about kind of how much pleasure I was giving, and I made sure that I was on my A game, and I just wanted to give a good performance because I didn't want sex to be that shit for them as it was for me. I know that sounds really bad, but I wanted to, the performer in me, which is not healthy, sex to be the performer all the time. It's a very false energy, but at the same time, nobody would ever really know. And I felt like I don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to keep pretending that this is, I'm a porn star. This is not what I want to do. And by not doing that anymore and really being present in the moment and actually wanting to connect, the guys that I have slept with have been like, and freaked out. And I've brought, my presence has brought up their insecurities and they're not sure really what to do or how to handle that. So I've ended up, trying to talk to them and say it's okay. But I'm like, this is not sex. This is now like therapy because I've terrified someone. This is not the kind of sex I want to have. But it is the communication, like you both said. The communication is so important. So we'll go on to the reference term, which Jules, I'm using you for this because you know this better than I do. So it's RDBSM. Is that right? Said it right? Yeah. So can you explain to us, A, where that comes from? And then B, what that stands for and how we can use it and how our listeners can actually use that term to have a better communication process through sex, because it's super interesting. Charles, you've got to learn a thing or two here.
Yeah.
Take note.
I think, I'd like to add something onto the communication around any sexual encounter anyway, which RDBSM fits into. Yeah. When I enter a sexual encounter, like my insecurities will be, let's say, in the field anyway, if I talk about them or not. And whoever I will have sex with as well. So once I actually speak about that, for example, look, there's a big chance when you go down to me, I get a little bit in my head, so I might ask you to stop. If that's out in the field, it's suddenly like, whoa, cards are on the table. There's nothing that I need to feel awkward about, or not as many things I need to feel awkward anymore. And by me opening up this talk, often the other person will actually like, oh God, so glad. Yeah, I have this little insecurity. Yeah. And so like coming from that point together is creates a different sense of connection, actually, like a playful scenario. So back to RDBSM. It's basically a structure that you can use when you either are with a new lover or with your partner. It's just like to use that regularly to revisit. And it's taken from ISTA, the International School of Temple Arts. So R stands for relationship, D for desire, B for boundaries, S for sexual health, and M for meaning. So you're meant to talk through either of these. So what's your relationship status? For example, I'm in a relationship, polyamorous, but my partner knows about that. I'm having a sexual encounter with you. I'm single, anything.
Yeah. So it's whatever your current relationship status is, you would share that with the other person just to connect, so they're fully aware there's no ghosts in the closet.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you would use it with a partner in a more regular scenario, obviously the relationship starts, yeah, we're still together, or maybe not, and that's probably should talk about this.
We can talk about this after sex. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Then D is for desires. What do you want? So, for example, with a new lover, it could be, actually, I don't want to have penetrative sex with you. That's often a common thing. Yeah. And maybe I just want to make out and maybe have some oral sex or whatever it is. Or maybe I just want some cuddles. Or maybe I want something really specific. You know, if you're together with someone, like maybe you want to design a kink scenario. But yeah, this is a space for that. Then boundaries. So boundaries could also be like, I definitely want you to use a condom. No penetration. Anything that you just don't like. Don't kiss my nose. Anything.
Yeah.
Boundaries. Sexual health. Such a big one. I've been struggling with this. Like, even when I already started talking about sex, it's like when I'm in a sexual situation, it's so interesting because there's like a myth of the ruining the moment, you know. Yeah. It's like, oh, now we have to bring in sexual health and talk about when I have been to a sexual health test last. So yeah, it's a difficult one. It's not easy. And the more we do it, the more we become accustomed to it. And it's, God, it's a whole different story in itself, how the resistance of people using condoms. And then the last one, the juicy one, is meaning. So what does this encounter mean for you? And it could be, and this is where it just becomes, when it's just a one-night stand, to say like, look, this is a one-time thing for me. Which is amazing, because then the cards are again on the table and it's honest and there's no manipulation or just like false promise. Yeah. And or just also honestly, like, I'm looking for a relationship. I feel I really like you. I want to know where this is going. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically the concept. And the interesting bit about that is, especially also in relationships, I found it interesting that, like, not every day I want the same sex. Some days I want to have some hard fucking, and the other day I might want really slow and sensual sex. Often in partnerships, maybe it's like we just all assume what we want or we don't, and then it just becomes like a bit weird. So it's nice to actually just have these talks. And it doesn't always need to follow this concept, but it's just nice to have this like structure.
Yeah, it takes a lot to be able to participate in that conversation. You have to, although it's a genius idea and it works a charm, it's, some people have never been that honest with themselves, let alone with another person. So to do it just before you're also about to have sex, you don't necessarily have to do it at that point, but it's good to kind of have when you meet earlier on. I would say and suggest, if anybody ever said when's the best time to do it, it would probably be a bit earlier on. But just, I think for me, if I'd have done that previously, I'd have been in a much better emotional state, almost 100% of the time, because last night I experienced it for the first night and properly, and I really respected that way of it working, and I felt completely different and really relaxed and very chilled. And that conversation flowed and it wasn't intense. It was done in the right way. But also to even practice these conversations, I would say, with your friends, because some of your friends may never had this, and to practice with another person just sharing that with just another human being might take the pressure off as well before you actually do it with the person you really fancy. And you're like, oh,
yeah, exactly. And so in Sex Club, we practice that. That's what I mean with a low stakes environment. Like we use, for example, tools like this and other exercises to just like, practice it with people. Like, I don't care about what they're saying, just for the first time. And also couples join, just like they may be in separate groups and then they can take these exercises home, for example.
Yeah. We're going to have to put these list in the discussion notes for when we put this on YouTube afterwards when it goes live, because then we can have people following the, so it's RDBSM?
Yeah.
Yes.
RBB.
Our relationship, desires, boundaries, sexual health and meaning.
RDBSM, okay.
Yeah.
Charles is making notes.
Yeah.
I've actually just opened my notes app.
Love it. But it's go on, what were you going to say, Jules? You sound like
and you're right. It's like it's just I don't want to say it's like, oh yeah, it comes easy to me. No, it still takes something to like really bring this up in a situation, especially like with new lovers and new partners. And I also had reactions where it's like, no, what? I'm not up for that. Like, okay, cool. And that's what and I'm prepared to take that risk, because if a person is not up for that, then maybe I don't actually want to have sex, because it's also playful. It's fun. It's like, oh, let's talk about it first and then go into it. So I guess it's like this like battle with the fear of rejection. Are we prepared? Or also like not just rejection, are we prepared that we might not get sex?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really big part, is like what comes after this you have to be prepared for.
Yeah. I think for guys as well, like when you're on a one-track mind and, you know, maybe you've both been out, you've had a couple of drinks, you've gone back to the house and like that's what's on your mind. And I think to have that sort of, I can understand when people are, both men and women, when they're uncomfortable with talking about it, because it's not something that we're made to feel comfortable talking about it, but that can be a big affront to them. And like you say, it doesn't have to be a vibe killer. But because of the way people react to it, it can be a vibe killer for them. So wrapping their head around that as something that doesn't have to do that.
Yeah. I think there's a way of also, again, just very brief experience last night. It was the touching part. When you're with someone, it's actually saying, "Are you okay with me touching you there, and like going over the body and finding out where the person is responsive to touch is so interesting, because although you might want to be played with here and you might be okay with kisses and all that kind of stuff, when he goes down there, some women, because this is one thing I did. So I did a video about this years ago when I first had my first YouTube channel. We're talking like 8 years ago. And I did a video about sex. And I basically said, look, for most guys, when they have sex continuously, they come most of the time. So they've got a positive connection to sex and they think, yes, I'm going to come. It's a great experience for them. So they want to go and do it all the time. If they were having crap experiences, it's not something you always want to go back to. But for a lot of women, we don't always have positive scenarios with it. So we go back to these scenarios and what was the last time we had it? And has it ever really been that great? And we think about this. So our sex that we're thinking about now, we've got to contend with all the stuff that's happened in the past as well. And I did this video of saying that most women, this was my assumption back then, is there's factors. It's like, am I clean? Have I shaven? Have I got any hairs sticking out? Whatever. Is this person going to call me again? Do I feel safe and okay? But feeling safe is the most important thing for every woman, I believe, during sex. But if these factors are like, is he going to judge me? Is he going to tell his mates? Are they going to put that out on WhatsApp? Is it going to be on a group chat? You know, where does this go beyond this point?
Yeah.
Because there's no discretion, that's, I believe, is quite a big part of the problem. And when I did this video, I got trolled, and it was one of the reasons that I closed my YouTube channel, because I had 3 guys who took it upon themselves, and they were very clever. I'm not going to lie, they were quite clever. They were pulling in like different videos and stuff of like music and tracks and lyrics, but like taking the piss out of me, but with all these different lyrics. And then one of them called me a frigid slut, and I'm like, whoa, it doesn't even make sense. But like he went in, and I took real offense to it, because he said, oh, you don't know what proper sex is like. And the other guy was saying, oh, I know they always have a good time because they all lit, you know, I always come. And I'm thinking, wow. And they were so masculine about it. It was all about them, not about the woman. And it made me see where a lot of young men were. So I closed my YouTube channel down and I spoke to a friend about it, and I said, these are my personal experiences, and I was getting loads of likes on the videos and I had lots of views and I had lots of people talking to me, but all because of the comments of these guys, I stopped. But I knew that then I tapped into something, because it is that if you have a crap experience, you don't want to go back and play the same game if you keep losing at it. It's not something you want to enjoy. So it's, if you can be a guy that can create a safe space for a woman, one that she feels safe in and that she enjoys what she's doing, she's not going to want to stop coming to play that game. You're going to be like coming back there because that's a positive connection, whereas mostly it's just like a detachment. But do you feel that a lot of women make excuses up about sex, like their periods or like they're not shaving legs, rather than just saying, actually, I just don't want to?
Yes, and I'd like to respond to what you just said, because creating a safe space for women, it really goes the other way as well.
Yes, totally.
So creating a safe space for each other. And I think we've been raised that there's something called being good in bed. And what does that even mean? Does it mean like you know how to circle your tongue around my clitoris, but then the next clitoris is different? And like, what about blowjobs? Every dick that I had is different, and they all like something different. I'm like, oh wow, I often got insecure. It's like, oh, I thought it really worked with the last one. Why doesn't it work here? And to like go away from this and really is like, be just humble. It's like, no one of us has any idea how to do sex, because all of our bodies respond to different things. So I think if there's anything called good, it really means like going into an encounter with curiosity and exploring this body and asking like, what do you want? And also on the what do you want, because I also actually got this question asked often, and I would respond internally with something like, you should know what I want. It's like, no, that's terrible. Actually, I need to find out what I want. So we can't like put the responsibility on the other person. I first need to find out for myself what I want, so I can actually also talk about my desire. So it's always a prerequisite that I really need to reflect on myself. What do I want? And that applies for men and women. And that we don't need to feel like I'm 40 years old and I feel like, wow, do I know anything about sex? It's like, oh, when I was 33, I definitely thought like, oh shit, I should know how to do sex. But it's like, no, I don't. Not anyone does. This is, shall we just start from scratch, actually, and like
start from a straight face every time.
Yeah.
Like pretend you know nothing and everything's a winner. What do you reckon, Charles? Do you reckon guys now, obviously a lot more men are, I'm not going to say that they're not doing conscious work. I think so many more men are doing conscious work. They're doing more kind of men's work. Do you think guys would be very interested and open to approach sex in a different way if they were taught correctly how to do that? Do you think they'd be quite, or do you think they'd still be quite macho, depending on?
I think it depends. Again, it depends who they're with. Like when they're with friends who may not buy into the sort of self-betterment, self-development side of things, that they may revert to locker room chat because it's much safer in that dynamic, and they're not being judged, and they don't want to be judged, and they don't want to have themselves rejected. But certainly, it's something that I'm going to bring up actually in my men's circle. As something to talk about because it's not something that's come up yet. We've all talked about our feelings and emotions and etc. linked to certain different areas of our life, and I don't think it's because we're not going to talk about sex or people feel awkward about it. I just think that it's not something that's come up. Maybe because in this sort of self-development sphere, there's all these things you work on, and then sex was almost boxed up and is a slightly separate area.
Yeah, it is totally.
So yeah, that's my view on that.
Do you think something like with the RDBSM, did we get that right? I'm going to be able to say it like a pro by the end of the weekend. So do you think, like, obviously you and Flo have been together for a number of years now. Is that something that you think that you could bring in at this stage as you're in a relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Jules, I was going to ask you afterwards if you could just send me the breakdown of all the things, because it's great that we're always trying to use new structures and just like we read up on things, and like the whole talking on a Monday thing, having like 10-minute check-in each, which has slipped by the wayside. We've been sort of tapping in once every sort of few weeks, mainly because we're exhausted and have a 6-month-old baby, and that's a real sort of test on just the ability to sort of process and communicate things. So I think at this time it would probably be quite a useful tool, actually, specifically at this time, given the current situation. And we sort of communicated about sex. It's certainly something that like I have found historically, sort of I felt uncomfortable when being asked or told to do different things, because it's sort of the younger man in me has been like, I should know what I'm doing, like, and then Flo's been like, no, that's not why I'm communicating. I'm communicating it because I want to communicate it, and I recognize that person in me and that trigger, and have sort of worked through that to varying levels of success depending on how charged up I happen to be at the time. But yeah, it's absolutely something that I'd love to. I'm sure Flo would love to as well. Just have these conversations. In fact, I'd probably want to do it. We were about to get on a car journey for an hour and a half, so we'd probably just do it in the car.
Great.
Where she can't get out, basically.
70 miles an hour on the A10. Yeah.
Yeah, will report back next time, like how it went for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I'll be sure to let you know. Full debrief.
Have them both on as well. That'd be cool to actually talk about it. But
maybe we could wire you guys in. Like we could do like a
live show, live from the car. Why not? Yeah.
You'll be on the FaceTime, like, hey.
Yeah. To be fair, Ryder he's now 6 months. He can pick up on a lot of stuff, so I don't feel comfortable with him in the car.
Okay. Yeah. No. He's. I'm not sure he can do his R's and his letters yet. SBD. No. RBDSM. He could say that before his first word.
It would be ingrained on his retina, I think. So
I wanted to just touch on that again with the RDBSM, in the fact that it's important to have these conversations, obviously, and to have them with somebody that you feel that you can trust. That's obviously the idea of having sex with someone you can feel you can trust. That's the most important thing. But a lot of people still drink and still have sex when they're taking drugs. Do you think, because a lot of people might feel that they need a drink in order to be able to have this conversation because they need to take the edge off or the nerves off. In your experience, Jules, have you felt like that could be a detriment to it, or do you think that it can help? It obviously depends on how much you're drinking, but just out of experience, because most people do have alcohol to have sex. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, just had to laugh because my first sexual experience after lockdown, where I felt a cookie monster with a jar, got really drunk, and there was no RDBSM or any talk before. So,
right, okay.
Yeah, and it didn't help because, like, being drunk, the only thing that I said is like, I don't want to have penetrative sex because we're too drunk. And from my experience, like being too drunk and drink doesn't add anything to sex. And there was a time actually where I realized at some point, like, wow, I think all one night stands were on the back of me being drunk. So yeah. No, it doesn't add anything, and I'm not against drinking, and I get how nerve-wracking it is, but I think it's more something that we need to, like, on a deeper level work through with this, like, fear of rejection, and as you said earlier, Charles, if I actually get told, like, don't do it this way, do it another way, there's also thinking, be like, oh no, I'm doing it wrong. But just like this practice of, like, it's okay. If actually someone tells me no or tells me honestly what they want, I trust them more because when they say yes, it's like, oh wow, they really mean it. So a lot of my insecurities also come from, it's like, oh, do they really want it? Do they really want to go down on me? Yeah. So just to establish this trust, like that everyone really only does what they want. And then it just becomes like, woo, different experience.
Yeah, I agree with the alcohol. I'd say that having sex on other substances, it's so different with different substances, particularly if you've only just had like if it's almost a controlled, I don't want to say experiment, but a controlled experience on a substance. So, for example, on LSD or magic mushrooms, it can be one of the most mind-blowing experiences, because you can just you can see into each other and feel into each other like you're one, and it's like an Andrew Jones painting, like a kinky one.
Woo!
Not that everyone needs acid or mushrooms, but those that know will have experienced that in some way, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, like for example, at Boom Festival, you're on a week of just exploration into the best place in the universe, and you do end up, if you're with a partner or meeting someone, end up having a lot of sex, because everything's turned up to 11, your senses are turned up to 11, and you're having a psychedelic experience, and it's really, really powerful. That's why the social come down from experiences like that is so difficult. Like the actual come down itself lasts for about 48 hours, and then you're like, oh, I feel fine. But then for about 3 weeks afterwards, you're like, why can't we all just live like that forever?
It's true. You have this oh my God, the world needs this. I always think whenever I've done any mushrooms, I don't know why I go into this. Wouldn't it be amazing if we just literally got all of our politicians high, just on mushrooms? They just all love each other. They'd solve the world's biggest problems.
Well,
much more sense.
You say that. I went to an interesting talk at Azora Festival last summer, and there was an interesting, very, very wry and dry Californian guy who's an expert in DMT and psychedelics, and he said, I want to make a very clear point. Taking psychedelics does not wake everyone up.
Okay.
A lot of people can have these experiences and turn into just broadcasting nutters who think that their way is their way, and they know everything. And I've experienced, fortunately, only one or two people. One specifically comes to mind. Obviously won't mention any names, but had an experience and a long experience as well, like spending a long, prolonged period of time and sort of being like, wow, this is just it's draining. And it was interesting to see that you don't have to advocate to everyone, but it's a very personal experience.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of traumas that need to come up as well first sometimes before the magic can happen. So the politicians might not have a great time after all. They might be a little bit like, oh, dealing with all their stuff of what they've actually done. So okay, so we're almost done basically. But first of all, before we do go anywhere, I want to say thank you very much, Jules, for coming, because I know you were a little bit nervous and but how do you feel your experience has gone for your first show with the Talkwits?
Great. I love hanging out with you, with you both. So more chats, great.
These just awkward conversations, and I think when you do them with friends, it just makes it much easier. And obviously, when we met at Medicine Festival the other week, instant energy. I clicked with you and I'm like, who is this person walking around? And we just kept bumping into each other. And I just felt, I always believe that the magic is there. It guides you to where you need to go next. That's what I felt with you. And then obviously finding out what you do, definitely said we'd have you on the show. And obviously you working with Connor as well, who is your business partner, who's the guy, what did he call himself yesterday? The kind of adopted dad of SexClub. Is it just supporting you in that way from a masculine perspective. But obviously to have you guys on talking about what you do as a pair, I think that would be a really good opportunity for people to see more of what SexClub is. So can you tell us where people can find out more about SexClub, and we'll also put that in the link below.
Yeah, the website is sexclubme.com. And we run it through Dandelion as well, which is an events company. Mm-hmm. And co-created events as well. And yeah, with Connor, it's really interesting. So Connor brings he studied psychology and counseling. So he brings in a lot of tools as well, where we really take sex clubs on a deeper level, where we really self-inquire into sex and to really deliberately, that people really deliberately can develop their sexuality and inquire and explore into it.
Yeah.
So we're running 5 to 6 week courses where we go into these different topics. As we just said, desires and boundaries is, for example, would be our first week. And then RDBSM is at the end of the course, that we can really apply these. So there's a sequence that we arrive in at a certain point, and we're not just thrown into the deep end. And yeah, it's a very, it's a deep journey. And also just funny and joyful as well, because sex is also ridiculous if we think of it.
It can be, yeah, it has been in my life anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
What we're doing.
So the next one we've got you on for, I can't actually remember which one we've got you on for next.
Am I going to be there too?
Huh?
Am I going to be there too on the next one?
I don't know. This is what I'm thinking. I'm checking now. So the next one. So next week, next Monday, we've got Step Away from the Laptop. We've got porn addictions on next Monday's show, which, yes, Charles, you are present for. And I have a fabulous guy from the States who's happy to come on and talk. He's quite a comical guy as well, talking about his addiction and his realizations of, he said, most people can talk to their friends about any addictions that they've got, really, if you go to a counsellor and stuff. He says, but the last addiction you want to talk about is that you're addicted to porn. So you don't even talk to your mates about that. And so he was quite alone on his journey, but he's got a really good story to tell next week. And then the next one is what we've got next week. We've got Wednesday. We've got, oh my God, she watches porn. So it's about the judgment of women watching porn and becoming more sexually liberated. So I don't know if you were available for that one, Jules, but I think we said that. And then we'll go on. That's next Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm not available for that one.
For that one. And then next Friday is the next 3 shows. Then we've got Chains and Whips Excite Me. So we're talking about that kind of bedroom stuff. If anyone's interested in that, and how you can kind of get deeper in on your kinks and what that's going to mean for you on a deeper level. And having the confidence to share that as well. I think that's quite important. Some people like kinky stuff and they daren't say anything. But rather than feeling shameful, it's about getting out there and bearing all and whipping and see if you like it or not. But yeah, I think that's it for today. So Charles, have you got anything else you want to add for today?
No, other than thank you very much, Jules, for joining us, and we'll see you all on Monday.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, Jules, we'll see you back at some point. And Charles, I will see you on Monday. And for everyone else that's listening, this is going to be available on YouTube, and it's also on our website. If you want any more details, you can go to www.iamsoundacademy.com. And actually, I should be more professional because, boom, look, there you go. Woo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And remember that we are not on social media. So we have, yes, different approach.
So odd there.
Yeah. Yay. I just, because I'm so focused on the camera and making sure I look at the camera and not on the screen, because otherwise my eyes go off. I forget that I even have these little options here, but I'll get used to them. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all on the next one. Bye for now.
That was amazing. Thank you both.